take this opportunity to thank the Buddhist Missionary Society and the Malaysia Buddhist Association for inviting me to grace this occasion and to give the opening address to the bilingual dialogue in both Mandarin and English on Mahayana and Theravada Buddhism. I am made to understand that tonight's dialogue session is the first bilingual session organized by the Buddhist Missionary Society and the Malaysian Buddhist Association to study deeper into Lord Buddha teachings and interpretation. Such a dialogue, I am sure, will help to contribute positively towards a greater understanding of Buddhist precepts, which will ultimately help forge Buddhist unity in our country. Ladies and gentlemen, it is general knowledge that Buddhism comprises various branches of the Lord Buddha's teaching, and such teaching is being taught in different languages. However, all these teachings do not deviate from the philosophy and goodness that comes from Lord Buddha. Like all other major religions in the world, Buddhism cuts across racial and language barriers. Tonight's dialogue is a good example whereby languages like Mandarin and English are used. To the followers of the Lord Buddha, I am glad to say that this is another milestone towards the promotion of unity and understanding of Buddha's teaching. It is my hope that the followers of Mahayana and Theravada Buddhism will find common platform to forge unity among yourselves, as exemplified in the organization of the Vesak Day celebrations. Ladies and gentlemen, we must reflect on today's world where materialistic well-being have in many ways eroded the spiritual values of a person. Many people have become too materialistic and that they tend to forget the spiritual values which are the guiding principle of leading untainted lives. In this context, it is timely to remind ourselves and to inculcate the Buddhist values and put to practice into our daily lives. Therefore, there is a need for a systematic religious education to fill the vacuum created by materialistic pursuits in our lives. Buddhist values are universal in nature, and this can be adapted and adopted by all. Ladies and gentlemen, as an individual, one needs purification of one's life and to continuously upgrade one's morals towards society and to fellow human beings. We must act responsibly to contain tension generated by overzealous propagation of faith by certain quarters. We must also remember that there are laws made by men to check the wrongdoers, but such laws cannot inculcate close fraternity among the people unless spiritual upliftment is given highest consideration. Therefore, tolerance and forgiveness, two important precepts of Buddha's teaching, are vital in a multiracial society like Malaysia. These are the cornerstone to maintain racial harmony and political stability. However, I must emphasize that Buddhist tolerance and forgiveness must not be misconstrued as weaknesses or unprincipled compromise. What we should highlight is that tolerance encompasses mutual respect for each other and the observance of human rights. Ladies and gentlemen, As part of the multiracial and multi-religious country, fellow Buddhists should not view tolerance from their own yardstick, but more importantly, they must understand the fundamental constitutional rights of the freedom of worship as guaranteed under the Federal Constitution. As with regards to forgiveness, a universal value, I must say that it should in no way be abused by any quarters to trample on the basic human rights of others. Although we can forgive human weaknesses and wrongdoings at times, this does not mean that we must keep silent when repeated encroachments of the human basic rights are being continuously threatened. Instead, we must take positive action to prevent such encroachments. Ladies and gentlemen, with these words, once again, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers, and it is my earnest hope that all present tonight will have a fruitful dialogue. Thank you and good night.
Ladies and gentlemen, I feel deeply honored to chair this seminar, but I also felt very worried while I was on the plane because of the aircraft delay. So I want to tender my humble apology to all of you. We are great because today it is a historic occasion. On the one hand, we have Reverend Kim Beng, who is a great Buddhist leader, the top Buddhist leader in the country, who is also a scholar, which I think most of us have heard what he said, and many of us have read his books. And on the other hand, you have another great leader of Buddhist movement in this country, in the person of Reverend Dhammananda. He's here with us. Geographically, one branch of Buddhism went to the north, that is China, and then went to Japan and Korea. Another one that's going to the south, from India to the south, that is Ceylon, Burma, and Thailand. And today we are fortunate that those represented to the north by the person of Reverend Kim Beng coming to the south in Kuala Lumpur today. And those representing the south branch represented in the person of Dhammananda. And both great leaders come this evening with us. So we are fortunate to have them, and in this time of difficulty, I think the two leaders, we have faith in them, we also have faith in our religion. Buddhism is still and will be a great religion for all Malaysians. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I stop short here, I make it short. Now I call upon Mr. Wong Hung Po to translate what Reverend Kim Beng has said just now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lai Kuan Fu. Ladies and gentlemen, I shall now give a very brief summary of what Reverend Dr. Sit Kim Beng spoke to you just now. He spoke on the history of Buddhism, which has a history of over 2,000 years in the world. And in Buddhism, there are two streams, namely the southern stream and the northern stream. The southern stream being called the Theravada, and the northern stream being called the Mahayana. And the geographical distribution for these two streams of Buddhism are as follows. For the southern school, they spread to the southwest of India and goes to Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, and some of the countries in Southeast Asia. And for Mahayana, they spread from the northeast of India, and in the early part, it crosses these Kashmir, Afghanistan, Iran, western territories of China, and finally enter into China, and then spread to Vietnam, Korea, Japan, and the islands nearby. Now, in Malaysia, we have Buddhism being taught in two languages. The English-speaking intellectuals will learn Buddhism from the southern schools, that is Theravada, all in English text. And for the Chinese educated, they learn Buddhism from the Mahayana text. But is there any difference between Mahayana and the Theravada? Reverend Dr. Sik Kim Beng says, in fact, there is no difference. Now, why is there no difference? I will now go on to tell you. Now, the Buddha's teaching can be said to be very flexible. He chooses the sentient beings and the people whom he met, and he will teach according to their understanding capacity, and also according to the environment and the situation where he gone. Now, in Buddhism, according to Reverend Dr. Sik Kim Beng, can be classified into three periods. The first period is to expound on the reality, which is called in Pali Sarvastivada. Sarvastivada. And this sect places emphasis on the Abhidhamma. It says that this sect of people believe that the Dharma has a real existence in the past, the present, and the future. Now, although they deny that the existence of an Atman or Atma in the sentient beings. And the second stage is called the voidness or emptiness stage. And the third stage is called the middle path stage. Now, the first stage, which I have just now briefly touched upon, explains the ignorance of the no-self. This sect believes that there is a self. So this is something that causes craving and ignorance, and because of this concept, this type of people will go around in the cycle of birth and death. And Buddha explained this, the cause of impermanency, to these people to get rid of this type of detachment. The concept of the voidness is to elaborate on the impermanency and the self-concept so that people will not have the attachment to the existence of everything. And for middle path is the average of these two thoughts. And in the middle path, the Buddha touched upon the Four Noble Truths, the five aggregates, the dependence, origination. And all these teachings of the Buddha can be found in the Agama Nikaya. And this Agama Nikaya can be classified into 5 volumes. First one is Nigga Nikaya, which is called a long discourse. Second one is Majjhima Nikaya, medium length discourse. Third one is a Samyutta Nikaya, grouped or connected discourse. Fourth is the Anuttara Nikaya. This is the numerical discourse. And the fifth one is the Khuddaka Nikaya, which is the division of smaller books. And on voidness, the purpose of voidness is to teach people not to get attached to things. But although the detachment objective has been achieved, but still people have to understand how to reach detachment. So in these schools, at this stage, they will expound on the nature of emptiness. And the Buddhist scholars that appear at this stage is Subhuti. And this Buddhist theory can be found in the Mahaprasna Paramita Sutra. And on the middle part, this theory can be found in the Dharma Laksana Sutra. And all the above methods are being carried out according to the understanding capacity of the people. Now, after the nirvana of the Buddha, Buddhism in India incidentally can be divided also into 3 stages. Out of the 1,500 years of history in India, Buddhism can be divided into 500 years. The first 500 years is called the Theravada prominent and Mahayana non-prominent. The first stage, first 500 years, is the stage where Theravada is more prominent. They enjoy this for 500 years. And this Theravada school is conservative. It can be classified into 2 sections again. One is conservative and one is progressive. The one which is progressive is close to Mahayana. And the second stage is called the Mahayana predominance period, and the Theravada is called subordinate. During these 500 years, Theravada declines a little bit and Mahayana is predominant and prevailing in India. The Buddhist scholars that appear during this period is Asva Ghosa and Nargajuna, Arya Deva. And these Buddhist scholars have written many commentaries on voidness or emptiness. And 900 years later, another Buddhist scholar called Asanga, and another one is Vasubandhu. He also based on the theory of Yogacharya, have written a lot of Buddhist books about this theory of voidness. And then the third period is called the historic period, which is the Tantric period, where Tantric is very prominent and the Mahayana and Theravada at that time declined. That is already 500 years later. And during this period, this Brahmin also has been rising in India, and during the time Buddhism was defeated and totally disappeared in India. So the first period is Theravada prominence period. Theravada schools has been introduced from this period from Sri Lanka to from India to Sri Lanka during the period of King Asoka's times, and from there spread to Burma, Thailand, and so on. And the Northern School Buddhism spread from India to China during the Eastern Han Dynasty. So from this you can see that the first period, the first 500 years of teachings of Buddhism, Theravada, has been spread from India to Sri Lanka. Touch upon the fundamental of this Buddhism and their development. It says that Theravada Buddhism is the basic Buddhism or the fundamental Buddhism, and Mahayana Buddhism is the development or the expansion of the Theravada Buddhism. Theravada Buddhism mainly concentrate on the Sangha community and on the expansion of the Buddhism, whereas the Mahayana Buddhism is based on the aspiration of the Buddha and expounds on this side. But actually, these 2 schools of thought, they are the same. Now, how is it that they are the same? Can be seen as follows. The Mahayana Buddhism is actually also based from the basic teaching of the Theravada. The basic teaching of Theravada is based from the Agama Nikaya. Agama means all the Dharma are collected together. And this agama that has been collected are mentioned by me just now, are collected into 5 agamas, Nikaya agamas. And in the Mahayana teaching, the Mahayana teaching also is based on the agama. For instance, in the concept of voidness, dependent origination, and middle path, they are based from the Agama Sutra. The Buddhist scholars like Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, Asanga, Vasubandha, all these reflects are from the teaching of this Agama Nikaya. And the Buddhism of China used to be said Mahayana, but actually in the China Buddhism they are also having this Theravada in the Chinese Buddhism. In Chinese Buddhism there are altogether 10 sects, but there are 2 sects which can be said comes from the Theravada. This is the Abhidhamma Kosa sect and the Satyasiddhi sect. Now from the Sutra of Abhidhamma Kosa Sastra and Satyas Sastra, you can find that these teachings are actually Theravada in origin. So from what we can see here, the theory of the Mahayana, actually they are also based from the Theravada Nikaya. And the third one is the sixth consciousness, which used to be said from the Theravada, but in the Mahayana they have added two more consciousness. One is the Kilesta Mano Vinaya, another one is the Alaya Vinaya. What is this Kilesta Mano Vinaya? This is the root of the mind consciousness, and this Alaya Vinaya is the storehouse of consciousness. So the Mahayana has actually expanded the 6 consciousness of the Theravada into the 8 consciousness concept. And in Mahayana they believe that the Alaya Vinaya is the one who is responsible for us to go around the cycle of birth and death. The rebirth is all because of the storehouse of consciousness. All the concepts that we have collected in our storehouse of consciousness that bring us to go round and round the cycle of birth and death. And from the Mahayana Sutra, we can also find the 4 universal vows of the Buddha or Bodhisattva. And this idea, 4 universal vows of the Buddha, is also based from the 4 Noble Truths, which is the basic teaching of the Theravada Buddhism. And this concept of 4 universal vows of Buddha can be found in the Dharmalaksana sect and the Yogacara school. Another point which has a similarity is from the Mahayana you have the 37 principles or 37 factors of enlightenment. These 37 factors of enlightenment consist of one, Satipatthana. Satipatthana means the 4 elements of contemplation or the 4 states of memory. It also consists of the Samapadana, the 4 right efforts. Consists also of the Iddhipada, the 4 states towards supernatural power. Consists also the Panchidriyana, the 5 moral factors. So all these can be found in the Eightfold Noble Path of the Theravada Buddhism. And from this you can see that Mahayana actually is the expansion from the Theravada Buddhism. And in the Mahayana, you also have the 4 kinds of qualities making for amicable association, which is called Chavari Samgraha Vastuni. What is these 4 kinds of qualities which make amicable association? They are 1. Dana. Dana means charity of giving and sharing. And the second one is the Priya Vadita, talking together and discussing things with pleasant and mild speech. The third one is Atacharya, that means doing things which are useful to others. And fourth is Samanatata, which means being even-minded and without pride. And this concept of the 4 kinds of qualities making for amicable association can be found in the Sigalovada Sutra of the Theravada Buddhism. And lastly is the 3 characteristics. And these 3 characteristics is also common among the both schools of teaching. So in conclusion, you can see that this Mahayana Buddhism is actually arising from the basic teaching of Theravada, and they expand this thought into Mahayana, which in actual fact there is no difference. Now in Buddhism, there is no race, no caste, no creed. They treat all the beings the same. Now the teachings are different is because it has to be based on the different characters, different capacities, different understanding of the people. So if we can look at this perspective, then we can see there is no difference, even though Buddhism can be taught in different way. As a matter of fact, there is no difference between the northern school and the southern school. That's the gist of all what the Reverend Sikh says. Thank you.
Now I have the honor to call upon Reverend Devananda to speak to us. And also the time, I think, let us follow is half an hour, 30 minutes, so that we have longer discussion.
Mr. Chairman, Venerable Dr. Sikh Kimbing, Venerable Sikh Binti, Venerable monks, dear friends. Just now you heard what Venerable Kimbing had to convey regarding this subject, Theravada and Mahayana schools. The main purpose of this dialogue is to find out how far we can get together, work together by removing certain misunderstandings, misconceptions pertaining to our religion, Buddhism. Those who have heard that there will be a religious dialogue here between Theravada and Mahayana, some of them might have thought today there will be a very big wrestling from the south and the north, from two wrestlers. Well, our main idea is to find out how far we can get together and work together. Because in a country like Malaysia, in a multi-religious society, if we are going to divide, if we are going to criticize and condemn the other schools of Buddhism, please remember there will be no future for this religion. There will be religious fanatics in Buddhism. I have seen many Theravada fanatics and Mahayana fanatics also. For example, a monk who has gone to Japan from a Theravada Buddhist country, when he was invited to the shrine room, he refused to pay respect to the Buddha. He said, "This is not our Buddha. This is Amitabha Buddha. I cannot worship this Buddha." They are called Theravada fanatics. And there are Mahayana fanatics who try to say, we Mahayanis have a very big thing. You Theravadians have a very small thing. So I really cannot understand what that big thing they are going to show us. My dear friend, whether we are big or small, we must understand we are the followers of the one master. Now let us see. Theravada and Mahayana, both a school without any controversy, except Sakyamuni or Gautama the Buddha is the founder and the master. So they have no two masters. Then Tripitaka, three sections of the teaching of the Buddha divided into Sutra, Vinaya and Abhidhamma. Sutra, simple teaching. Vinaya, discipline. Abhidhamma, higher psychological aspect of a Buddha's teaching. Theravada and Mahayana, both except Sutra, Vinaya and Abhidharma, without any problem. Then, the basic teaching, Four Noble Truths, Chaturari Satya, Dukkha, Samudaya, Nirodha, Marga. There is no controversy regarding this issue between Theravada and Mahayana. 8 noble paths, Arya Ashtangika Marga, Samma Ditti, Samma Sankappa, Samma Vacha, Samma Kammanta, Samma Ajiva, Samma Vayama, Samma Sati, Samma Samadhi. Both a school except this is the correct path for us to find out our final salvation. Then, Paticca Samuppada, the cause and effect. Everything that which exists in this universe depends on each other. This is called cause and effect. Both the school accept that it is true. Then karma and rebirth. There is no difference whatsoever when you come to this aspect of the Buddha's teaching, action and reaction. And how rebirth takes place according to our way of life, way of thought, way of talking and way of doing things. Both a school accept without any discrimination. Then we talk about Devaloka, Brahmaloka, heavenly realms and Brahma realm. Again we talk about Pretaloka, where there are ghosts and hungry ghosts and spirits live. And we also talk about hell. All these two schools accept these places without any controversy. Then Anatma, biggest issue among the scholars. Others say there must be a soul, eternal soul created by the God. The Buddha was the only religious teacher in this world who denied this. Both Theravada and Mahayana denied this belief, existence of eternal soul. Then Nagarjuna, a well-known Mahayana Buddhist scholar, is the one who has elaborated, developed this concept of anatta, anatma, soullessness into voidness or sunyata. So it is not a development or the discovery of Mahayana school. It is in the Buddha's teaching, earlier recorded in Tripitaka. Then, if these basic principles and teachings are the same, where can we find the differences? Is there any reason for us to discriminate others or to belittle? It is our own egoism, my dear friend, not Buddhism, not Mahayana or Theravada. Our own egoism. Let us take a very important point, why Mahayana schools always say they are big. Earlier they used another word for Theravada, Hinayana. Hina means very little, very small. For Theravada they use the word Hinayana. But during the World Fellowship of Buddhists, Buddhist delegates from all over the world unanimously accepted not to use these ugly words anymore. No more Hinayana, only Theravada. Today you did not hear this word, Hinayana, only Theravada. I'll explain how this word started. Then, Buddhism was originated more than 2,500 years ago in northern India, neither in China or Sri Lanka. So, the Buddha preached for 45 years, day and night, without sleeping, all the while going on preaching. After his passing away, his disciples had a very big problem, because many of those discourses, sermons, lectures, he has given in various places to different people, even without any disciples. He was alone on many occasions. So 3 months after his passing away, most of them were Arahantas, holy, saint, not ordinary monks like us. They assembled and decided to hold a council, a convention, to discuss, to decide, to confirm what are the basic teachings of the Buddha. So they held this under Gijjakuta rocks, Vulture speak. Then during this council, they discussed so many subjects that they could not clarify. One of the main problems was, before his passing away, the Buddha has advised the monks and the nuns to amend, to change certain minor Vinaya rules, because he knew in time to come there will be a lot of difficulties to observe. So the disciples could not decide what are those minor precepts. That was the only controversy. the rest all accepted by the disciples without any controversy. So they continued without any difficulty for 100 years. After 100 years, they had some problem. There were some young monks who wanted to change certain Vinaya rule, discipline. Most of them are related to their food and clothing and certain requisites, but they are not immorals or wicked. Even then, elderly monk could not agree with them. Then they have decided to hold another council. During this council, they discussed all these things, then decided not to change anything according to their taste, according to their whims and fancies. Anyway, they could manage to maintain for another 100 years. At that time, what happened? When Buddhism was flourishing in India, many of those Hindu Brahmins came and joined the holy order as monks. And they are the ones who wanted to incorporate so many Brahmin ideas, Hindu concept, Hindu belief, Hindu tradition into Buddhism. So when this situation was going on, elderly monks and Emperor Ashoka, who have taken so much of trouble to introduce Buddhism, dedicated his life to introduce Buddhism, given his full support to hold the third council. During this council, they have discussed many of those heretical views, new concepts, new practices, new beliefs. Most of them are magics and occult ideas and so-called miraculous power, too much of divine power, they imbued into Buddhism. In the early part of Buddhism you cannot find. Today we talk a lot about mystics in the name of Buddhism, but the Buddha has rejected at the beginning. So they wanted to incorporate all those things into Buddhism. So during this council, again they have discarded and purified the basic teaching. Up to this date, now 300 years after the Buddha, up to this date, we cannot find in any record that they have used anywhere either Theravada or Mahayana. Please remember. There was no Theravada at that time and no Mahayana. Only Buddha Dharma. But after this conference, the word Theravada originated there. Then they used the word Theravada. What does it mean? Thera means elders, elderly monks. And those elderly monks who have accepted the basic teachings of the Buddha is called Theravada. This is the third council. Then in India, 2nd century, during Emperor Kanishka's time, various other schools of Buddhism started to develop, divided into 18 schools. Today we are fortunate, we have only 3. Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana, that's all. But In those days they had 18 schools. They had different views, opinion, interpretations. Then the idea of Mahayana school already started. This is nearly 700 years after the Buddha's passing away, 2nd century. There was a king, supposed to be an emperor, in Kashmir. His name is Kanishka. He has given his full support to those Mahayana schools. But there were brilliant scholars in Mahayana school, because most of them were Brahmins, well versed in Sanskrit, grammar, languages, literature, philosophy, psychology. When you read the names of the Buddhist scholars, Dharmakirti, Dinnaga, Ashwaghosa, Vasubandhu, Aryadeva, Nagarjuna, brilliant scholars. Most of them were Brahmins. And when the other Brahmins tried to challenge, to topple Buddhism, only Mahayana scholars had to face this challenge. At that time, Theravada school was dwindling, fading away from India. There was not a single Theravada Buddhist scholar in India at that time to face this challenge. Only Mahayana scholars. When you read the books written by them in Sanskrit language, you can see what sort of arguments they had to bring forward to defend, to protect Buddhism. Especially Nagarjuna and Dharmakirti. But in Sri Lanka, 80 years before Jesus Christ, Tripitaka, or the basic teachings of the Buddha, have been already recorded. But they held this conference even after this. So when they started to hold the Mahayana Council in Kashmir, Pali Tripitaka had been recorded in Sri Lanka. Then, when you read Saddharma Pundarika Sutra, Lotus Sutra, Diamond Sutra, Vajrachedika, and various other Mahayana sutras, you can find the basic teachings of the Buddha in all these sutras. That is why I told you, there is no difference. There is no different doctrine, different philosophy in Mahayana. But as mentioned by Venerable Sikh Kembe, Mahayanis have not only expanded, elaborated, beautified, decorated, they have done so many things. So that is why Buddhism has become a world religion today. Especially in China. If Mahayana Chinese Buddhists have not done that, Buddhism never become a world religion, because they knew what the people need. According to their needs, what they can understand. By realizing this, they contributed. Let us take the concept of Bodhisattva. This is the big thing that Mahayana always glorifies. Bodhisattva. They say Theravada Buddhism never talk about Bodhisattva. They are wrong. Theravada Buddhism says there are three kinds of Bodhisattvas. Savaka Bodhi, Pacceka Bodhi, Samma Sambodhi, 3 kinds of bodhisattvas. Please remember this. Those who work to gain sainthood, arahanthood are known as Savaka. And until they reach this final target, they are known as Shravaka Bodhisattvas. They are also bodhisattvas. Another group fulfill all the perfection, paramitas, to become Buddhas, but they are known as Pacceka Buddhas. They are known as Pacceka Bodhisattvas. Then another group, but very few, because this is the most difficult task in this world for a man to gain, becoming a supreme enlightened Buddha. More and more new Buddhas coming, but you produce them. Without any perfections or paramitas, you can produce any Buddhas. They are also enlightened ones, they say. But here we are talking about the enlightened, supreme enlightened Buddha, the most difficult, but people take the trouble to fulfill all the paramitas and perfections and duties. So, Theravada Buddhism also mentioned 3 bodhisattvas. But the difference is this. Mahayana Buddhism highlighted, emphasizes praying and worshipping to bodhisattvas. But Theravada Buddhism never encouraged the followers to worship and pray to bodhisattvas until they gain their enlightenment. This is the only difference. Then we have different schools. We say we have no unity. Actually, we have unity. People say this is a unity in diversity. For example, for the last 2000 years, in the name of Buddhism, we cannot find any record in the history in any part of the world where Theravada and Mahayana and different schools of Buddhism have ever created violence or bloodshed in the name of Buddhism. But when you study the history of all the other existing religions, when they were divided into various sects and schools, you can see how they have violated, what sort of bloodshed, discriminations they have created. This is the uniqueness of the Buddhist tolerance that we are practicing. So what we have to discuss tonight, actually, now in brief, we have learned the historical background and how differences started, and still it is not too late for us to get together and work together without any differences. Differences take place due to our cultural, traditional practices, geographical condition. Now let us see the dress of Venerable Sikkim Beng and my dress. And this is the dress introduced in China according to that climate in that country. So, but this is the dress they introduced according to climatic condition of China and Korea and Japan. Therefore, if I say that Reverend Kim Beng is wrong, I am also wrong. Again, the time that they take their food, they take food at night time. Theravada monk says they don't take food at night time. Therefore we condemn them, saying they eat at night time. Now what is the Buddha's advice? Just now I told you, before his passing away, he told us, in time to come you may experience some problem. You are at liberty to change this minor rule. It is our mistake. So I blame Theravada school for that, but not Mahayana. Why? Still they could not discuss and finalize and could not announce officially. These are the minor things. Therefore we must adjust ourselves according to these situations. That is why sometimes we will be in very embarrassing position when we visit certain countries. But Mahayanis adjust according to the country and the culture and the way of life to carry on in practical way. Just now, Venerable Kimbing said, Theravada Buddhists concentrated more on monks. I think it is true. Because I noticed those Theravada Buddhists in Singapore investigate what we eat in Kuala Lumpur. Yeah, I heard this. So it clearly shows that Theravada Buddhists are very particular about monks, what they eat, where they sleep, where they go. But Mahayana Buddhists are not very particular about this. They are too orthodox. This orthodoxy they use in such a way with their narrow-mindedness, because they do not know how to make use of this. The Buddha has given us freedom to amend so many things, but not immoral things, wicked things, harmful things. Among those Vinaya rules, 75% of Vinaya rules are based on traditions, customs, manners and way of life. All these things are changeable from time to time, from country to country. Otherwise, Buddhism never become a practical religion, remain as a statue without any changes. Then, two mistakes done by Theravadian and Mahayanis. Having seen what Chinese are doing, Theravadian says, look at the way, according to Mahayana Buddhism, how they practice Buddhism. Whatever Chinese do, Buddhism get either credit or blame. When they slaughter chickens and ducks and pigs and offer in the name of their god or departed ones, Theravadians say, oh, that is Mahayana Buddhism. They cannot understand Mahayana Buddhism is dead against of killing and eating also. According to Mahayana Buddhism, no one can eat meat or fish also. And these are the weaknesses we have to discuss and find out. We should not blame Mahayana Buddhism having seen what Chinese are doing. I always tell our Chinese friend, even Chinese ghosts are also a very reasonable one. Because they follow some sort of discipline. Only once a year they come out from hell and stay only for 1 month, disturb you only for 1 month. You give them only 1 chicken leg. they can satisfy and go back. See how nice they are. But all the other ghosts come and disturb us every day. So this is the way how they have organized. These are traditional, customary practices they uphold. What we have to do? We have to show the difference. The danger is this. Having seen all these practices, especially Christian missionaries take the advantage to ridicule Buddhism and poison, do some brainwashing amongst our young boys and girls and see the way how you people practice Buddhism. So we have no right to stop those practices. Anyway, our duty is to point out that they are not Buddhist practices. They are mere Chinese traditional practices. Otherwise, very easily they can spoil the name of Buddhism. However, my dear friend, whether they are Chinese practices or not, time has come for you to minimize, to reduce so many rites and rituals that you practice in the name of your culture, in the name of your tradition, or in the name of your religion. Because in many other countries, people are not interested anymore in those practices. Then, you must know how to meet, associate with each other and exchange our views. Now, the biggest problem is our language problem. Now, Venerable Kim Beng and myself have been working together for so many years, but still we too cannot exchange our views directly. So our way of extending our goodwill and kindness is just like making love through an interpreter. So no real taste. This is the biggest problem. Language problem. Second thing, we must know how to respect the other man's culture. Chinese culture, Indian culture, these two things are the ancient culture on this earth. So not so easy for them to get rid of them. On the other hand, it is not necessary for Chinese to become Indians after accepting Buddhism. Buddhism was originated in India and nurtured, developed according to Indian tradition, Indian custom, Indian way of life. That is what the Buddha said. You are at liberty to change these things. So when they are going to practice this religion in China, how can they follow the Indian tradition? So these changes are acceptable. Sri Lanka is close to India. Language, culture, religion, way of life, so many things are interrelated, Indian culture and Sri Lankan culture. Therefore, it is very easy for Sri Lankan people to adapt their way of life according to Indian way of life. That is why they could manage to maintain the basic original teachings of the Buddha in Sri Lanka. Now, 3 countries, India produced Buddhism. Sri Lanka protected the basic teachings of the Buddha. And China made Buddhism a world religion. So by realizing these facts, our duty is to maintain our friendship, goodwill, and understanding. At the time. It's okay. Anyway, in conclusion, I would like to give a quotation from a Mahayana Buddhist scholar, Dharmakirti. In Sanskrit language, he says, Swapakshe vidyate raga, parapakshe tu apriya, nirvanang nadigacchesi, nasivang dvandhacharina. Is a beautiful saying for all of us. Those who praise only their own schools or their own religion, by ridiculing, discriminating the other schools or other religions, if they are Buddhist, nirvanang nadigacche, they never get the chance to experience nirvanic bliss. If you can pray so many times a day to the Buddha, at the same time you discriminate the other schools of Buddhism, the Buddha is not ready to answer your prayers. Again he says, Nasivang dvandhacharina. And this kind of narrow-minded people who maintain such belief, our school, our religion is the best, all the others are wrong, never find out their liberation or salvation or peace. This is a beautiful saying in Mahayana school. This is not only for the Mahayanis, this is for the whole mankind, the follower of any religion. I think with these few words, Mr. Chairman, can I conclude? The time is up. Thank you very much.
In the talk by Reverend Dr. Sit Kim Beng, due to the constraint of time, he could only touch on the similarities. In fact, when he first began to prepare his speech, he has at least 10 points, 10 similarities. And tonight, you will notice that he only managed to touch upon the similarities and he did not mention anything about the differences. And fortunately, the part of differences has been well covered by Reverend Dr. K.Sri Dhammananda. Now, from the history, we should learn that it is no point for us to criticize each other's shortcomings. If we do that, the price that we pay is very great. As you can see in the history of Buddhism, after the passing of the Buddha, we have Mahayana and the Theravada criticizing each other, attacking each other, and as a result, there's a time Buddhism's gone down, dwindling. Now, in the topic like this tonight, we heard that we say Mahayana is a big vehicle and Theravada is a small vehicle. When you have big and small in one's mind, you'll think that big means big and small means small. So the big starts to look down upon the small. That is wrong. In the English language, or in the Chinese language, or in the Malay language, big and small, there's a difference. But in Buddhism's explanation, there shouldn't be any big and small. In the final analysis, there is no big and no small. Actually, all are equal. So we should not have this type of discriminations. And Reverend Dhammananda in his speech also had touched upon the concept of bodhisattva, which Mahayanists try to glorify. Now this, we have to understand, Bodhisattva concept is a very ideal concept. Bodhisattva is one who has very high ideal, very dedicated. In the Mahayana Buddhism, when we see one who just renounced and becomes a nun or a monk, we'll say he or she is a young bodhisattva. And when one progresses and reach a senior stage, we'll call this monk or the nun senior bodhisattva. Actually, it's no point to call one a bodhisattva if one doesn't possess the spirit of a bodhisattva. Bodhisattva means one who really aspires to achieve Buddhahood, and he should salvage the sentient beings, and he should make it a motto to serve the public, to serve the people. Now, if you look into the history of Buddhism, during the Buddha's time, there were many theories existing in India. There are no less than 60 different religions exist in India. The Buddha learned from them, debated with them, but he never used force or violence to convince them. And there's one misconception which people used to have, that is, they always draw the similarity, draw a same parallel between Buddhism and Brahmanism. They thought that in Brahmanism, they talk about rebirth, they talk about nirvana, as though that Buddhism gets the idea from Brahmanism or Hinduism. And it is a very sad thing to note that in our history book in Malaysia, I wonder whether you have noticed this, that there's one section they say that Buddhism is the same as Hinduism or Brahmanism. And Reverend Dhammananda in his speech has mentioned about the Ulambana celebration carried out by the Mahayanists here. And the Mahayanists have got the blame because the Chinese devotees, they slaughter chickens and so on. Here, it is necessary for us to clear the misconception that Ulambana is a month for us to practice filial piety. But in China, these traditions has been already twisted. Actually, when first it was introduced in China by Liang Wuti, the emperor, it was not like this. It actually wants to encourage the practice of filial piety. But later, as time goes on, the traditions and rites and rituals have been mixed into this celebration, and now, instead of becoming a special festival to inculcate filial piety, we have now turned it into a festival to worship ghosts. Now, in view of this, Malaysian Buddhist Association has organized on 3 occasions a celebration for people to understand the real meaning and real significance of celebrating Ulambana. That's all.
Now I call upon Dr. Dhammananda to add a bit more to what he has said. I also limit it on 6 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for having invited me. The time is very limited. I would like to give few more ideas for you to think over, to adjust our religious way of life to promote Buddhism and to maintain healthy Buddhist atmosphere. First and foremost, I would like to advise you not to convert the Buddha either into Theravada Buddhism or Mahayana Buddhism. Buddha is free from both. In fact, the Buddha was not a Buddhist. You may get a shock. The Buddha was not a Buddhist. The Buddha was the most enlightened person who ever lived on this earth. We are the Buddhists who follow his footsteps. Now you can see the difference between the Buddha and Buddhist. So, we cannot find this word Theravada or Mahayana in the Pali Tripitaka, which was recorded 80 years before Christ. So this clearly shows these two words are our own production to introduce different type of views and ideas and belief according to our way of understanding. So certain suggestions, because we have noticed that there are some discrimination. Especially, I am sorry to say, although I was brought up according to Theravada tradition, but I don't agree with them for everything. When Mahayana monks, either from China or any other country, visit certain Theravada Buddhist countries, in certain Theravada countries, those monks are not ready to accommodate Mahayana monk as real Buddhist monks. And they don't like to invite them to take even food with them. They separate. I have noticed this. So we don't like to see this ugly attitude. There is no reason whatsoever for us to show any superiority of any group. Our duty is to respect each other, whether they are Theravada or Mahayana. Not only Buddhists, even the other religionists. The Buddha's advice is, whether they are Christians or Muslims or Hindus, if they are worthy of respect, the Buddha's advice is to respect them. When the Buddha was there, he used to visit other religious places. Jainas, Niganthas, Brahmins and Tirthakas, and when they meet, they exchange greeting in this way. This is the cultured people's attitude. Even today there are certain Theravada monks in some countries, they are not ready to even raise their hand to another Theravada monk or any other religious teacher. Even popes or archbishop also, they are not ready. They would like to do like this. Because that is stubbornness actually. There is no discipline at all. So, we must learn how to respect each other without showing any discrimination. That is the first thing we have to learn. If there are little bit discrimination in our mind, we have to reduce it. Then the second idea is, Theravada monks do not know anything about Mahayana philosophy. And many Theravada monks also do not know the basic teaching of the Pali Tripitaka. If they can study, if Theravadian can study Mahayana Buddhist philosophy, and Mahayanis can study Pali Tripitaka, English translation is available, then they can get together very easily. Third one, whenever they organize any religious function, whether it is dana or chantings or blessings or festival, try to invite the other group. Theravadian must invite Mahayanis, Mahayanis must invite Theravadian. As I mentioned earlier, our biggest problem is the language problem. It doesn't matter. We must try to communicate as much as possible and get together by participating in various religious activities, just like our Vesak Day celebration. I also mentioned in my talk, the biggest problem is our traditions and customs. Chinese have their own way of traditions and customs. Indians and Sri Lankans have their own way. And Thai and Burmese have their own ways. Please don't try to introduce these customs as Buddhism. The monks who have gone to the West from Thailand and Burma and Sri Lanka, what do they introduce in the name of Buddhism? Sri Lankan tradition, Thai traditions and Burmese traditions. In the West, people are not particular about their practice or belief or tradition or culture. So we must know how to show the difference of our culture, our tradition and our religion. So when we practice our religion, we have to start from the beginning, from our childhood. First, we must introduce our culture, our way of life. That is the foundation. After that, we have to develop our understanding of the intellectual aspect. Don't depend on cultural aspect always. Traditions and cultures are changeable from time to time, country to country. When you come to the intellectual aspect, to use your common sense and sense of reasoning, there will be many things that you have to find out the significance of these teaching, these practices and these beliefs. After that, cultivate more a spiritual aspect. Intellect itself can create a stubbornness and a skeptical ideas. So intellect is not very healthy if it is not governed by the devotion and confidence. So we cannot practice a religion without devotion and confidence simply by using mere intellects. So when you develop our devotions and confidence, there are many things we have to uphold. Our simplicity, our humble attitude, and our tolerance. These are the ingredients of that. So we must maintain these qualities and reduce our stubbornness and reduce our stiffness and discrimination. I have read many books and articles written by Mahayana writers and scholars. Majority of them always try to ridicule Theravada Buddhism. They try to show there is no development in Theravada Buddhism. Theravada Buddhism is unfinished, they say, not completed. Only Mahayana and Vajrayana have done this completion. Just now you heard Venerable Kimbing mention. Theravada Buddhism is the foundation. If there is no proper foundation, your whole building will collapse, my dear friend. You must have strong foundation. So, why is this necessary to dig out? Unnecessary thing to glorify their own particular school, that is higher, this is the more advanced and more superior school. And this is the way how we create discrimination, differences. If we create these differences due to our cultural background, we can justify. Because it is natural. Not only human beings, animals also. The same brand of animal who maintain different colors cannot get together, cannot live together. They also discriminate other animals. There's one thing that I have noticed in our temple. I have planted 2 creepers, flowers. We have an arch. One corner, one plant, the other corner, another kind of plant, flowers. These 2 creepers started growing, come to the center. When they come near, one group turn this way, the other group turn this way. Can you imagine? Because these 2 belong to 2 different groups. Cannot go through each other like this. Then turn this way and go back, and the other one also turn. So one plant still remains, the other one already dead. If the inanimate plant also maintain this natural discrimination, so we cannot blame human beings for maintaining this discrimination, because it is natural. Some people say, black is black, white is white. It is true. But why it is necessary to make black into white and white into black? No point at all. When you need black, here you need black. When this one turns into white, you hate that white color. Why it is like that? So remember, black also needed. Again, people never realize these things. But when you come to religion, the Buddha says, here we have different rivers. We have given different names. Klang River, Pahang River, Rim River, this river, that river. When all these waters go into the sea, we give only one name, sea water. The original names completely disappear, in the same manner. When we work together for our final salvation in our spiritual journey, whether we are Chinese or Japanese or Indians or Koreans or Europeans, no differences whatsoever when we reach the final target. There we cannot recognize. No discrimination. So we are working for that. So these differences we maintain as long as we live as worldly people. In worldly sense, there are some values. But in the spiritual sense, there is no value at all. So religion is for that purpose, to reduce, to eradicate all these differences and discrimination. And I get the red light from the chairman, so I have to stop here.
Now, since it's rather late now, I'm saying that Reverend Dhammananda is to speak in 6 minutes. Now I have to ask Engineer Ang to make a summary in 3 minutes, if possible. According to the organizer, from now on, this time is the period of time they are given for you to raise questions. But it's now too late for you to raise questions. So tonight, if you have any questions in future, the seminar like this, then you can raise the question. According to Dr. Kim Beng and Dr. Dhammananda, both of them agree from now on, we should have more seminar like this. We have more understanding between the two groups of Buddhists, to promote more understanding and so to promote more unity among us. So now, tonight, only these two great leaders with us are only start the ball rolling. It is, I hope, this is an ongoing movement. From today onward, all the Buddhists from the both sides will come together and find the basic teaching of Buddha. Finally, the last one is the highest place. We are all one in one. There's no difference between the two. So we hope once our two top leaders start the ball rolling, it's not rolling and rolling in Petaling Jaya and Kuala Lumpur. The ball start roll from here to Penang, to Alasta, to Johor Bahru, all over the country. And then from now on, it will be a great movement of understanding and harmony between two groups of Buddhists. Thank you. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, have a big hand and to thank our two great leaders.
To conclude this dialogue session, we invite Mr. Tan Teck Beng, Vice President of the Buddhist Missionary Society, to cast a vote of thanks.
Honorable sirs, ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasant duty as Vice President of the Buddhist Missionary Society to extend our heartfelt gratitude to our chairman of the dialogue for having so ably conducted this dialogue session tonight. Our thanks also, of course, go to our two venerable speakers, Venerable Dr. Sik Kim Beng and Venerable Dr. A.C. Dhammananda, for having come here for the first time to enlighten us with the two major schools of Buddhism, that's Mahayana and Theravada. I think before this, we have never had the opportunity to know in somewhat the details about the differences or similarities between these two schools of Buddhism. Now, it was the hope was expressed by the chairman just now that this sort of dialogue session will be continued in the future. More and more such sessions will be held so as to promote greater unity among all the Buddhists in this country. I also would like to express a hope that in addition to this type of session, dialogue session, we may be able to form a federation of all the Buddhists in this country, because it is very essential that we must come together in order for our religion to survive in this country. So, in ending this session tonight, I would like also to thank all of you who have so very kindly sacrificed your time to come here to listen to this dialogue session tonight. And I hope you have all not only enjoyed the dialogue session, but also have learned something at least concerning the history of Buddhism, how Buddhism broke up into two major schools of Mahayana and Theravada after the passing away of our Lord Buddha, and also how it developed and gradually became more and more different in nature. And what we must do now, from now onward, not to discriminate against each other or to condemn each other, but to try to find ways and means of coming together more closely so that we will not call ourselves Theravadas or Mahayana Buddhists, but we just call ourselves Buddhists. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us have a very big clap for our two venerable speakers. Good night to all of you.